All right, so I think we're going to start this meeting we have today. I want to first thank everyone for taking time from your busy day to join us today at the NIACE Lunch and Learn, and we really appreciate your um, choosing to spend that time with us. Like I said, my name is Paula da Silva Michelin. I am one of the NIACE members, along with Emma, who is also here. And I hope some of you will be joining us next week in Albany for our annual conference. We're going to have a lot of very interesting workshops and information to share with you there. But before we do that, today we have Janita McNamara. Did I do a good job? And and Margaret Kirkpatrick. I hope I didn't destroy your last name.
No, that was
Joining
great.
joining us from the NDP, the National External Diploma Programs. They're here to talking about some pathways to help high school um, graduation rates. Here we go. Now the floor is yours, Janita and Margaret.
Thank you so much. We very much appreciate, Paula, your allowing us to be here today and share with you. Um, I am Margaret Kirkpatrick, the NEDP director, and I do want to apologize for not having my face up there, but I'm having trouble, technology problems. I'm sure that that's a shared emotion here, and I've been working on the camera, but it's not working with me today. So, uh, Janita and I are here to talk with you today about the National External Diploma Program, an alternative high school completion option, a pathway to the New York State Equivalency Diploma. NEDP is a program that is sanctioned by your state department, and we have been working within New York for a number of years and work now through a contract with your state so that many of the expenses of implementing and then continuing to offer NEDP are in fact supported by the state contract. So I'm going to be, first of all, offering you an overview of NEDP. What is it? What does it, what is it? Its background, where does it come from? Who does it serve? That sort of thing through this PowerPoint overview, which I can make available to you if you do put your contact information in the chat, or I can send it to Paula and she can send it out. I see Paula saying, yes, I can send this PowerPoint to her and then she can send it out to you. But that's kind of the boring part of it. That's the, oh, let's look at another slide kind of thing. The fun part comes when Janita is going to actually walk you through the program, give you a sense of what it feels like if you are a client or if you are an NEDP staff person going through the program. And then at the end, we're going to leave time for some questions. But I would like to say this isn't a lecture. We're a rather small group. I would really like for us to see it as much more of a conversation. So please feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat or even unmute and ask questions. We really would like to make sure that by the end of our time with you, we have had a chance to respond to your questions or to react if you just have comments to make. Janita will be following the chat box while I'm speaking, and I will follow it while she is doing her presentation. So let's just go ahead and go through it. As a big picture overview, the NEDP, the National External Diploma Program, serves adults and out of school youth. It is not an instructional program. There are several unique things about NEDP that really set it apart from what we traditionally think of in adult education as pathways to a diploma or pathways to an equivalency diploma. NEDP has really some aspects that are based in the fact that it was developed for adult learners and it really follows the andragogy principles that we know, the art and science of teaching adults. So it is a competency-based applied performance assessment program. And we're going to show you some examples of what that means, and we're going to talk about it a lot more. It is a pathway to the New York High School Equivalency Diploma. And as I said, we have been serving New York agencies for quite a long time. It is an online distance education program, which can be entirely distance. That is, you can offer your clients, and we call them clients, not students, as I said, because it is a non-instructional program, but it can be from soup to nuts, from very first part of the NEDP program to all the way to the end, can be offered through a distance modality, or there can be face-to-face modules. However, your program can best serve the clients that are working with you. Another one of the unique things about NEDP is that all of the performance tasks, and there are about approximately 70 performance tasks that make up the way that the client demonstrates their high school academic skill level. They build a portfolio by completing these performance tasks, and all of the tasks parallel job and life situations. And this follows one of our adult learning theory precepts we know is that adults want to see a reason for doing the work that they're doing. They want to see a reason for fulfilling a task, doing a math assignment, doing a reading. It needs to be relevant to their life. And we recognize that, and we put attention to developing the tasks around job and life situations, things that adults see and need in their life. So just a couple of statements about the history, because it really does say something about what we are today and where we are today. We have been around since 1975, so we're actually in our 51st year. We were developed at the same time the Ford Foundation was supporting the adult education research on adult learning. And that developed into the field of andragogy, the art and science of teaching adults. So we were never a repurposed youth program. We were always an adult program. We have been recognized 3 times by the Federal Department of Education. First, in 1979, we were validated for national dissemination. It was developed in the area, Connecticut, Maryland, New York, in that area. So it was on the East Coast for only for the first part of its life, but in 1979 it became national. We were recognized again in 2020 when the federal department recognized NEDP as an innovative practice in the first round of Advancing Innovations in Adult Education initiative. And the reason I think this is important is because for a 50, or at that time, a 45-year-old program to be recognized as innovative really says that NEDP and NYACCE, which is the agency which houses NEDP, pays attention to the changing needs of our learners. Since it's an online program, it can be updated to reflect a changing field of need for adult education and can react to those needs. And then in 2022, NEDP was recognized as an innovator in addressing digital literacy skills. Again, another new area of need for adult learners, and NEDP was able to react to that need. So a few facts. I always want to call this fun facts, but I've been told that's probably not a good title for this. So anyway, it's just facts. We are presently in 9 states with over 90 agencies, and we are continuing to grow. The average time that a client spends in our program, and we have a lot of data since 2013 when NEDP went from being a paper offering to being an online program offering, we really have a lot of data. So what we can say, looking over our years, is that generally a client would stay in the program 6 to 9 months. But our clients have a lot of control over how fast they go, so they can be shorter, or as we know, adult client sometimes have barriers that come up in their life, and their timelines change according to their needs. But we can also say, which is probably a better way to look at it, because it does emphasize the control that clients have, is that it takes approximately 130 hours of client time to complete the program. So that's a way to state it that emphasizes the clients really can go faster if they have the time themselves, if they have the requisite skills, and can work forward. All of the work in the program has to be completed to 100% mastery. This is an alternative program to perhaps a test, a HiSET, or a GED, but it is not one of lesser work for the client. So all of the work has to be done to 100% mastery, and I'm going to talk more about that later. As I said, there is a focus on digital literacy, life and work skills. We really want this to not only be relevant to a client's life, but also they can see the relevance to their life. It is self-paced and flexible. As I said, it's an online program. The client and their NEDP staff person meet face to face, whether that's over a computer program such as Zoom or sitting in the same room with a desk in between. Periodically, that's approximately once every 2 weeks for a in-office meeting. It is not a test, but they will be demonstrating their skills, demonstrating the tasks that they have been practicing between the meetings when they do the work that has been assigned to them. They do this work independently, so they could get whatever assistance they need from an online source, or from a friend, or from a cousin that really is really good at math and comes over and helps them. But we need to know that they are doing the work. And so there is a in-office check. Again, not a test, but it is a practice of that skill in front of their NEDP staff person. I will just say here, because I think it's important, there are no tests in NEDP. Once the client demonstrates their skill level coming into the program, there are no more tests. There are activities which they can attempt multiple times with support given by their staff person until they demonstrate 100% mastery of every activity. And then NEDP does award several scholarships, $500 scholarships to graduates each year. And I will just give you a little statistic here, because very often we are asked, well, is this good for people to go on to college? Every year we do a graduate survey for everyone who has graduated after they've been out for a little while. We ask, what was especially important to you in order to graduate, and where are you now, and what are you doing? Of those who respond to our graduate survey, 30% are in post-secondary education or further training. 30% is not bad for us. And then of those, 16% are in four-year colleges. The majority are in community colleges, but we do have a number that go on to four-year colleges. So our pathway allows people to be successful in their next step, whether that's post-secondary education or further training. So we're going to be talking about today, and so I want you to be able to look at the presentation that I'm doing kind of with two eyes. There is the opportunity for you to become an NEDP provider. but you can also just refer your clients, your students, to a state hub. NEDP has a New York State hub, which can serve anyone in the state of New York without you having to be a direct provider. So we're going to talk about that later, but you can look at this kind of these two ways. And Joan has her hand up. So yes.
Oh, hi, yes. I was just curious, you mentioned the majority are in of that 30% are in community college. Do you have a percentage of how many are in community colleges?
Yeah, that would be, uh, I'm not looking at the number right now, but I think it's like 56% are in community colleges. But I'm betting that Janita could look up that survey and put a number in the chat box.
Okay, yeah, great. I'm curious. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. She could also put in the reference to where that survey is. It's on our website. Thank you for that question. So in EDP, because it leads to a high school diploma, we are very careful when we are mapping out the all of the assessments to make sure that we are evaluating at an appropriate level that qualifies a client to receive a high school diploma. So the foundational skills of reading, writing, listening, speaking, mathematics, and information and communication technology and media literacy are very carefully mapped to ensure that they are being evaluated at a high school, high intermediate high school level. But in addition to those foundational skills, we know that adults, unlike youth, are in a program to get a high school diploma 98% of the time, not really for the diploma itself, but to use the diploma to enable them to go on to their next goal. They need a diploma in order to. So this is always in our mind. What we see is a career or next step training or next step preparation. So we have integrated work readiness skills throughout the program, beginning at the very first part of the NEDP program. They start with a career interest inventory that helps our client identify several career areas that are of interest to them. And then we use that information throughout the rest of the program. By the time they complete the program, they will have developed a resume, they will have done a job search in their local geographical area in those career areas that they've expressed an interest in. And they would have worked on the interpersonal skills, the organizational skills, communication, digital literacy, all of those skills that are important in their next step, whether it is post-secondary education, further skills training, or going directly into jobs and getting better jobs going up that career pathway. The self-efficacy skills are not the kinds of skills that have a checklist, but they are the skills that college deans and employers tell us enable people to be successful. They give them the basis, they give these clients the basis to work from, learning to learn, metacognition, controlling their own learning, problem solving, critical analysis, personal responsibility, time management, problem solving, self-awareness, self-direction. These are all necessary at the beginning of NEDP, but they truly are enhanced through the course of our clients working through the program. So just another little bit of data. And this is looking back, as I said, in 2013, NEDP went online, and that's when our data started getting more accurate. And this is the data set that we refer to. Of the over 14,000 NEDP clients that we have seen from 2013 to present, and we just updated this about 2 months ago, so I am confident with these numbers. Of those, 51% have graduated. 39% have exited. Now, we don't think that those people are all gone because their work is still in the NEDP program. And we see every month when I look at monthly reports, we see people who are re-entering the program. So exited doesn't mean out of the program, it just means paused. And so we think a number of these 39% will come back after whatever adult situation took them out is resolved. And then 10% are active. So, who would be our clients? As I said, they do need to be self-directed because they are working in a distance education program, and they must be able to work autonomously with personal responsibility and problem solving. I said it's a non-instructional program, which means that we need to ensure that our clients coming into the program are able to do the work, to be able to read the materials, to do the math that are contained in the NEDP program. So in order to ensure a high percentage of success, a high likelihood of success, we must have our clients achieve a high intermediate score on reading, writing, and math instruments. So I know that CASAS is a new offering that is going to be in your in your catalog of approvable assessments along with TABE. And maybe you already know a little bit about the scores. We can say it's high intermediate, but if you're familiar with the CASA scores, we'll tell you that it's a score of reading at 236, which is a high intermediate, writing, which is 3 out of 5 on a written prompt, and math is 226. And that again is high intermediate. There is a TABE crossover. You can't use TABE instead of CASAS, but TABE is a really good predictor of the CASAS scores. We find it especially valuable for speakers of other languages or individuals with different learning styles or who learn differently, not because the rigor is any less, but because the kind of accommodations that are very often requested are built into the program, such as a longer time or working in a quiet place or changing the face of the computer for color or for size of font, this sort of thing. It's all built into the program and in the control of the learner. So where might you find current students who would be good candidates for NEDP? You know, why do we want to have this as an option? If you have a high school equivalency program, a GED test program, and I was an adult school principal, so I know we always had students that the GED teachers would say, this student knows the work, they can do the work, they can do the practice tests, they can do all of the assignments I give them in class, they just can't pass the test. The test itself is the barrier. These students can be very successful in NEDP where they have practice at their own rate. They can retake any part that wasn't completed to 100% mastery. They can continue to work forward. It's not an all or nothing. They have incremental progress. If they're really feeling frustrated in their program, if you have a credit completion program, and again, we had this, and we would have adults come to us with very low number of credits. So they would be looking at maybe 2 years, and they didn't have time to sit in class. Their skills were high. So they would be a good candidate for an NEDP program. If they need flexibility in transportation schedule, all those kinds of impacts that an adult schedule has. And they may be advanced ELL students who would like a credential but struggle with all or nothing tests. So what can we expect from the client as an outcome, and what can the client expect from us? I said it's a non-instructional program, but they do build skills because they're working in the context of an adult environment. So, for example, in looking at math, and in the NEDP, math is evaluated in money and area because that's the way adults really use math. And some of the questions about math have them working on what would be the cost of a credit card that has this rate, or what would be my mortgage payments if I had a mortgage that was at this rate, and how long would I be paying it off? So in the course of doing demonstrating their skill level in math, they're also working in a context of what does it look like in a mortgage with a mortgage, and what do these terms mean? And with credit cards, what does a payment look like, and what would be a percentage difference if I missed 3 or 4 months and I got bumped up to a higher rate? So there really is a lot of learning happening while they are in this adult ed context. They're evaluated against a criterion of mastery instead of comparison to others. We take a lot of effort to make sure that a client who graduates in California, and a client who graduates in Virginia, and a client who graduates in New York have all met the same level of mastery. And we do this primarily by two ways. The first is that the evaluation criteria, the answer key, is in the program itself. So the NEDP staff person, that would be the assessor, doesn't have to have a book in front of them, doesn't have to work out the problems themselves, doesn't have to know the material to know what the answers are. The answers are in the evaluation criteria, which is right there in the program. The second way that we really enforce this criterion of mastery is, and you'll see later, the a minimum staffing for a program is 2 trained staff. And we do this because one person will be working with the client. And even though they're not teaching, we know that over the course of 6 months, there's meeting every week or every 2 weeks, there's really a relationship that gets built. So there is a tendency to say, oh, I know how hard he's working. I can really see that he's almost there. If I just see it this way, maybe it's met the criterion. There, in order to prevent any of that happening, we have a second reader. Eventually, it's someone trained at your staff, in your staff, who also reads the client's work and ensures that, yes, it has met that level of mastery. The second reader, called a portfolio reviewer, hasn't worked with the client, so they don't have this relationship. They are just looking at the material to make sure that the client has met that criteria. And we feel confident that we do have an ability to say NEDP has a national standard. They demonstrate mastery through incremental achievements. They never have to redo any work that was done to the level of mastery, even in the longer assignments, such as writing an essay or developing a cover letter for a job application, where there are multiple evaluation criteria. As the client goes through the assignments, anything that is done to the level of mastery never has to be looked at again. Even if the whole assignment has to be redone for some other elements, those aren't evaluated again. Clients have the flexibility to really set their own schedules as long as they can find 8 to 10 hours a week to work on the material, whether it's late at night, early in the morning, all afternoon while somebody's taking a nap. If they're caregivers, they just have to have the regularly scheduled meetings going forward. And then they do earn a New York high school equivalency diploma. So what does it look like? We're getting very close to being through with these and talking to Janita. So everything is online. NEDP is in two phases. The first part is generalized, the diagnostic phase. Second part is generalized assessment. Another thing we know from adult learning theory is that adults don't like to be surprised. They want to know what's going to be expected of them, what's going to be presented to them. So the diagnostic phase allows our clients to become familiar with what they're going to see as they go forward. And this is where they confirm their high intermediate skills, as I said, with the CASAS instruments. Phase two, they build their portfolio. There's 70 plus tasks. So in the diagnostic phase, it's about 2 weeks to a month. They have several instruments, one that looks at all of the tasks, the topics that they will be looking at, one that looks at the technology that they will be expected to use. A third instrument that they will use is the ONET interest profiler. This is where they go through a process of identifying 2 or 3 career topics that interest them. And then finally, they have a career and college competency inventory that helps them review their academic history and their own employment history and really start to think about how can I use my past experience to go forward. In the NEDP generalized assessment, as I said, 6 to 9 months, they work independently on these activities in 8 competency areas to build their portfolio. And at the bottom there's the portfolio review. As I said, this is the second reviewer who can certify, verify that the competencies have been demonstrated. So the areas that they work in, the functional competencies, as you'll see there on your right, applied math and numeracy, communication and media literacy, information and communication skills. These are what we think of as really integrated competencies, functional. We couldn't really pull them out and put them in an area by themselves because they are so important and really threaded throughout all of the others. So for example, applied math and numeracy is largely in consumer awareness and financial literacy, but there's also some math in 21st century workplace, and there's a little bit of math in science. But the named competency areas are cultural literacy, health literacy, civic literacy and community participation, consumer awareness, 21st century workplace, financial literacy, geography and history, and science. Leaving a moment there for you to look at those. So what does it look like? And this is going to be, after this is my handoff to Janita. The client goes into this interface, completes all of the activities in the assigned areas, and uses the online resources. The online resources are either PDFs that are developed by CASAS, are curated websites. In about 6 tasks, they are asked to go into the internet and do independent research. The assessor, this is the NEDP staff person, goes into the same interface with a different level of authority, and they proctor, as I said, these meetings, these in-office checks, these once every 2-week meetings with the client, either online or face-to-face. They evaluate the client's responses and provide feedback, not instruction, but guidance that allows the clients to be successful in their next attempts in any work that didn't meet the 100% mastery level. The portfolio reviewer goes into the same interface. If you remember, this is the second reader, evaluates the client's responses, and provides feedback. I'm going to stop my share so Janita can bring up the demonstration, and then I will be, but does anybody have any questions while Janita is bringing this up?
You can either unmute yourself to ask a question, or you can put in the chat.
Okay, hearing none, this is not your last opportunity to ask questions. Feel free to raise your hand, put something in the chat as I'm speaking, because I'm glad to take your questions as we go through this little tour of the program. So you're looking at an NEDP site that was created strictly for a training. So these are not real clients, but everything else you see is real. These are the actual questions in the program, the actual evaluation criteria. It operates just like, it would operate for a real NEDP client. So I created a client for you all, and you'll see that just for the sake of training and practice, all 8 of the competency areas that Margaret went over with you are open. But in real life, we wouldn't open 8 competency areas. We always start with health literacy, and then we open the competency areas in order as the client completes a set of work. We open the next set of work. So they always have a manageable set of questions to deal with at any one time. And we open the competency areas in this order for a prescribed reason, and that's because we build in complexity and depth of knowledge as the client goes through the program. The health literacy questions I'm going to show you first. They're fairly simple, DOK1, go into the resource, find the answer and plug it in kinds of questions. And we do that again by design. We want the client to begin the program building some confidence, building some momentum, and also kind of learning how to navigate NEDP. How do I reattempt work that didn't demonstrate mastery the first time through? How do I prepare for those in-office checks? How do I make corrections? How do I, what does it look like when this area goes into portfolio review with that second assessor and all of that? So while they're sort of learning the flow and navigation of NEDP, we're going to give them the least challenging work. And then we scaffold that and build, the level of knowledge and complexity as they work through. So let's start by looking at something early in the program where the level of complexity is still very low, and that's in health literacy. Health literacy as a competency area consists of 10 competencies. And just to give you a sample of what this looks like throughout the program, those competencies always have at least one take-home activity. Sometimes they have 2, and many times they will also have an in-office check. And just to remind you of the difference, the activities are things that the client completes on their own time at home on their computer. The in-office checks are proctored. So this is where the assessor and the client sit down face to face or remotely, and the assessor observes the client completing the things that they've practiced at home. So this is how we ensure that the diploma seeker is in fact the person who's mastered these skills. So about halfway through the area, the client has a topic called health planning. And here and throughout NEDP, there's an overview. The client can see it. I'm looking at it from an assessor interface right now, but I can see it as well as the staff member. And the overview sort of sticks to that perspective of no surprises for the client. The client should know what they're being asked to do and why. And these overviews make the case to the client, why this is an important skill for an adult learner to know or to be able to do or to understand. Because if we can't make that case, this is not a competency that has relevance and it doesn't belong in the NEDP. These should all be relevant and useful skills. So the health planning overview makes that case. And then the client goes over into activity A, and they're given 5 resources. This is about to go down to 4 resources. And they're asked to select a health planning topic. Here and throughout NEDP, we can measure the same skill set, but give the client some choices about what's relevant to them. For some of our clients, learning about health planning for, family planning is a really important topic. For others, it might be completely irrelevant. So, being able to make that choice and knowing that our clients are going to demonstrate the same skill set regardless of what they choose, but letting them have that flexibility is a really important part of, the power and agency that we're able to give to our clients. So this client selected Children's Health Planning, Resource 2. So they would click that. The resources that we provide are always either a curated website, like this one is from the Department of Health and Human Services, or it is a PDF that we've created based on, commonly used and respected sources. So our client is going to use this website to answer a series of questions about getting their child's vaccinations on time. And so a typical question here, remember, this is early in the program. These are kind of seek and find answers right now. We're not asking them to do a lot with the information, just reporting what they've read. So it asks, list 3 ways to make shots easier for a child at the doctor's office. This is a section in our resource. Our client has given us these 3 answers. So when I come in as the assessor to evaluate, I don't have to open up an answer key or a teacher's manual. I just click on this pop-up and it gives me the list of possible responses that were verifiable in the resource. And I just have to see if the answers meet or match those required responses. So I could say, trying to get all this showing on one screen, ask the doctor or nurse how to hold the child. You'll see that's the first bullet. So I can mark that as demonstrating mastery. Comfort your child is mentioned a few times. Distract and comfort your child. Comfort with a favorite book or toy. I can mark that as demonstrating. Leave the room if you are upset. Those of you who are parents know that that is not a recommended way to make shots easier for your child. That's not in the resource. It's not in the evaluation criteria. That one will have to be redone. And I can leave a note for my client saying something like, please review the resource to find another way to make shots easier for the child. I'm going to refer them back to the resource. I'm not teaching them that way. I'm just telling them where they can go to get the answer. When they come back to redo this, number 1 and 2, they'll still be in the system, retained in there. They can't change it even if they try. They can see them so they don't repeat the same correct answers, but they'll only have to redo the one they got wrong. And I can see that my little box turned red, giving me a quick visual indicator that that was incorrect. So that's what we look like at the beginning of the program. But as I said, we build in complexity and depth of knowledge as we work through those 8 areas. So I want to give you a sense of what that looks like about halfway through the program in consumer awareness, which is a math, won't surprise you to know it's kind of a math heavy competency area. Credit cards is an example of how clients use math to demonstrate mastery of relevant life skills. Again, we begin with an overview, telling the client what they're going to be asked to do in activity A, in activity B, and in the in-office check. The in-office check is not a pop quiz. They will always know there's an in-office check coming, and here's what we're going to ask you to do. And it's something that repeats a skill that they had the opportunity to practice in the activities, because that's going to build success. Clients knowing what to expect and having had the opportunity to practice it and demonstrate it before they have to do it in a proctored setting really helps to reinforce, possible success. So over in activity A, we start with an activity on reading a credit card bill. This one has a PDF that goes through a sample credit card statement with all of the key information on that statement, what it all means. And our clients apply that to another credit card statement. We never ask them to bring in their own. These are simulated activities. So they're using Ian's monthly statement and they're answering questions about this key information using a drop down. Note that you'll never see multiple choice in NEDP. There are no multiple choice questions. Almost everything is an open field, but there are places where there are matchings and drop downs, things like that, or radio buttons. Then we get into the math. We have a pretend person named Juana who has an average daily balance of $5,000 on her credit card. Woo. And she's got an APR of 16.99%. We give our client an algebraic expression that they will use to solve to find out how much interest she owes. This is just a substitution problem. They're basically just putting in the numbers from this situation into the variable fields and then solving. But even so, there will be clients who don't have any idea what to do with this. And if that's the case, the assessor can't teach them what to do. But when there's a discrete digital literacy or math skill, there'll be a tutorial that accompanies it. And the tutorial is a video with a transcript that the client can take all the time they like during that, activity time to review, to get to know, to practice, and so on. So they would apply what they learned from this tutorial and plug in the numbers and solve. And this one was auto-scored. The system recognized that $70.79 was correct. For the next one, Juana is figuring out her interest on a slightly different, on her savings account, just a slightly different equation. She's really, really close. She said $2.09. The answer was $2.08. I might love my client and know how hard she worked and want to give her credit for this because it's really close, but I can't. This is a program of 100% mastery, so it has to be on the penny. So I'm going to mark this not demonstrated, but we train very carefully to leave notes like your process appears to be correct. Please check your final answer. Please check your rounding so that our client doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay. And then we have a table. All of these fields are blank, of course, when the client comes in, but they go through the process of looking at Lonnie's monthly interest charges. She used to have an APR of 12.99%, good solid APR for a credit card. She didn't pay her bill for a few months and incurred a penalty rate. So we want our client to tell us how much is she paying in interest on the same amount of, average daily balances with the lower penalty rate, the lower rate and the penalty rate. So that clients can see that that percentage of interest is not just some number that lives on your credit card statement. It's money you pay the credit card company for the privilege of holding a balance. And that is, that's an eye opener. It's doing the math, but it's also an eye opener. Like, I don't want to have to spend 20 more dollars when I haven't borrowed anymore. It's just going to pay the credit card company. I see your hand, Joan. I'm going to call on you in just a second. Though this is done in an activity, they repeat um, this basic practice in the in-office check in a proctored setting, so that we know that this ability to figure out the interest rate is a skill that our diploma seeker has. Joan, what's your question?
Right, yes. I'm wondering, you mentioned when you're giving the feedback, for example, like with the math question, that you can say things like your process looked correct, right? Is there a way that you can kind of, because what I'm seeing is like the client will put in their answer. How do you know like what their process was? Like, is there a place where you're seeing that, or is that coming from like the in-office
Yeah, they haven't
checks?
we didn't ask them to
Mhm.
show their work. That's a great question. This is just the final answer.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
they could not have gotten this close to the final answer had their process not been correct.
Mhm. Yeah,
Right? So
that's
if my
fair.
client,
Mhm.
yeah, if my client had given me the answer $32.86, my note would be different. I would say,
Mhm.
please recalculate, look at the tutorial, something like that to encourage them to rethink the whole thing. But I want to be careful with my note when it's clear that I want to give my client credit for getting this close, right? And we
Mhm.
spend a lot of time in training and in professional development working on notes that are in the sweet spot of giving enough information so that the client knows where to go to make corrections, but not so much that we're venturing into instruction ourselves.
Mhm. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Margaret, but if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat.
I said that there are two ways that you can use the information that we're talking about today. If you're interested in thinking about being an implementer of the NEDP program, and again, you're going to get this when I send it to Paula, but the process would be to start with an information session with us where we go into more detail with this. And also there is an NEDP information kit, which is on our website, nedp@casas.org. There's an awful lot of information on that, and I think it would give you a bigger picture of our program. And I would especially point out there are some very inspirational videos and quotes from our graduates. We also, because we are working with the New York Department of Education, this is a QR code that will get you to what they require to be approved as an NEDP program. And the first is the NEDP Sustainability Plan. The process would start with looking at your trainees. Just so you know, I said that there were a minimum of 2 trained staff. They don't have to be teachers. They just have to have a 4-year degree. The training can include people who are not going to be working directly with clients, observers and administrators, and there is no charge for those folks to sit into the training. This is a little bit of what a trainee would be, the qualities and I'll let you look at that if that's the path that you're looking at. Potential NEDP clients can go directly to this website, and then that gets them to an application link where the process of enrolling them starts. So as I said, you really have two ways to go to look at NEDP becoming part of your thinking. And we also have found one effective way, if you're not sure if you want to be an NEDP implementing site, but you have some clients that you think would benefit from it, you can always direct them to this NEDP at the department email, get them going into the hub, and just stay connected with them to see what their experience is, perhaps provide them with tutoring. They can remain in your program. And then you can make more choices about how this seems to be serving your clients. So now we have time, I think, for questions.
Any questions, anyone?
I have another question. Sorry, I have so many
John.
questions. Um, if someone, I can come up. If someone like is becoming a provider of this program, I'm curious because I'm kind of seeing the list of like who some of the New York State providers are of this, and some of them are like the libraries and things like that. Like, how are they? I understand the criteria for who might be a good candidate, but do you have
Uh-huh.
examples of how programs are kind of navigating, like if they have a GED program and they also have this, like maybe that's a vague question, but kind of how are they navigating that? Or do you have examples of
Well,
that?
yeah, what we really recommend is the NEDP process for clients really starts even before they register for NEDP. It starts with this session, this information session, which is not a sales session, but uh, it is in fact a way for a program to present all of their programs as they are, pros and cons. It takes this long, it requires this much work for you, it takes you coming in to the site for this long for A, B, and C. Maybe you have a GED program and you have an NEDP and you have a course credit program, and clients need to have and students need to have full information to make choices themselves. One of the things that we're really clear about is NEDP is not a program for everyone. GED is not a program for everyone.
Right.
Course completion is not a program for everyone. We have services that really speak to a group of students with a certain need, as GED has a program that speaks to a certain group of students with a certain need. So if potential students are given full information, we don't think NEDP takes GED ready students because it takes longer. And we don't think that GED takes NEDP eligible, those that would do better demonstrating rather than taking a test if the test is a barrier and they know they're never going to pass the math test. So it's our experience that if we emphasize in our training, as we really do, this first part of giving information in a really kind of clear, non-judgmental, and not sales kind of attitude, clients with it, students needing information can make the best choice based on what's being offered to them. And we spend a lot of time in training working on that.
That's
I've heard
helpful. So it's
Margaret say
kind of like a
before,
menu
yes.
for potential clients, like a menu of what you're, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I've heard Margaret say before, NEDP is intended to supplement, not supplant the other options.
yeah.
And it's really empowering to an adult learner to come in and to say, you know what, I need to get my high school diploma. Or they'll often come in and say, I need to get my GED because that's the language they're familiar with. And to have that person at the front desk say, do you know there are a couple of different ways we can do this? Let's talk about those options. And then you can choose the one that's going to be the best fit for you. That's starting a client or an adult learner out in a position of power and choice. And I think that's so important.
Thank you, Janita. Yeah.
All right.
Any other
Eh,
questions? I would just add that
I
anyone
think
who wants
Zoe
to
has a
follow up.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Zoe. Yes.
No, no worries. I thank you for this lovely talk. I did want to ask, so we're a one-to-one tutoring facility. We offer like free of charge tutoring. So if
Yeah.
we were to start collaborating with NEDP and have our students sort of or clients sort of work with the NEDP system, are there any materials that are available through that system that we could work on them with? Because I know that we're trying to be like mindful of not teaching someone and yet giving them the support that they need to kind of like move their way through the program. Yeah, that's my primary question. Yeah.
Janita?
So there are really kind of two sections of NEDP, the diagnostics and generalized assessment. The diagnostics is basically getting people past those required cut scores on the CASAS reading and math tests. And there are lots of really good instructional materials to help with that. We don't provide those, but like Essential Education has a CASAS Academy. Aztec is aligned with CASAS competencies. So any of those can help a potential client get up to the cut scores. Once they start NEDP, though, all we ask is that the tutors teach to the underlying skill, which you can easily see by looking at the overview, not teach to the item, but like for instance, with those interest questions we were just looking at, use different numbers and teach them how to do that interest formula, substituting numbers for the variable terms, but don't teach to the item. And I think that's our tutors, ABE programs, literacy volunteers across the country do that with NEDP clients.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure. And
Right.
I'll mention
Um,
that if we get a hub candidate, somebody applies for the hub, we give them the reading and math test. Let's say they don't make the math cut score. If they're not going to make a cut score, it's going to be the math, right? Probably. When that happens, NYSED has a pocket of money in our contract that allows us to pay for Aztec, which is an online skill building program. So we would immediately say, you didn't make the math cut score yet. Yet is our big word in NEDP. You'll get there, but you didn't do it yet. Would you like access to this Aztec account? It's no cost to the student and they can work on it independently. So
Oh,
that's a
thank
nice thing to be able to do so that there's a path forward regardless of how they do on those preliminary tests.
Yeah, that's amazing. Awesome. Thank you.
anyone who wants to schedule a meeting with me and Janita, and the information will be on the PowerPoint when you get a copy of it. We can do that. We can set it up very quickly. We are pretty flexible, and information sharing is kind of what we do. And we would be glad to talk with anyone further if you wanted. It's not a commitment to go forward. It's more of an exploration of what this would mean to your program.
All right. I want to thank everyone and thank you, Janita and Margaret, for doing this wonderful presentation and sharing this information with us. Was really helpful. And thank everyone else for taking time to join us today. I will send out the Zoom presentation and their contact so you can move forward if you are interested in scheduling one-on-one meeting with them. Thank you again, everyone, and I hope to see you next week in Albany if you're joining us at the NIACE conference. Okay? If not, in
Thank you
May for
all.
Lunch and Learn.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Cool. Thanks, Paula. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye bye.